Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
According to the Palestinian Central Elections Commission, there's a high turnout of voters for today's municipal election in the West Bank. Head of the Liberation Movement, Mahmoud Abbas, called on the UN to apply pressure on Israel and allow them to conduct these elections freely. Abbas added that the municipal elections are being conducted amidst restricted Palestinian sovereignty, which presents the Palestinian Authority with a massive national challenge.
For
the first time since 1976, about 144,000 Palestinian voters headed to different polling stations in more than 26 districts in order to elect city council members. 887 candidates are competing for the 306 seats. This is the first election where candidates from Hamas and Islamic Jihad are running for city council seats. However, these two movements announced that they are boycotting the upcoming presidential election, thus making this a fierce race.
Our Islamic Reform Coalition is running for city council seats because it is a service position. Wide-scale political discussions are taking place among the various factions concerning the presidential and legislative positions. These positions don't serve the minimum demands of the Palestinian people. However, everyone agrees that we should participate in the municipal elections, since it serves the people.
Voters lined up at the polling stations early in the morning, including Palestinian Prime Minister Ahmed Kareh, who voted in his city of Abu Dis, near occupied Jerusalem. Commenting on the elections, he said it is a step toward establishing a Palestinian state.
I am proud that this election is being held today. The municipal election is a first step. It is the first municipal election since 1976. That's why this election is important. And if God is willing, candidates will be able to run in a clean and transparent election and serve their people in a non-central way.
To
ensure transparency, the local election commission deployed 260 foreign observers and hundreds of local observers to the polling stations. The Palestinian police were also deployed to the voting locations, but Israel only allowed each officer one handgun.
We rely on all transparent international procedures for conducting the election. The election monitors are available at all polling stations, and voters will be able to vote at the location they registered at. Finally, the count will be conducted at the voting locations in front of the observers and appointed officials.
Nevertheless, candidates and members of the local election commission found it difficult to travel from one area to another. This is in contrast to Israeli claims that they are facilitating the movement of Palestinians. The Palestinians perceive this election as a smaller version of the presidential elections and attests to Israel's intentions, which are already being demonstrated by setting up more military blockades rather than removing them, thus disturbing the democratic process. Majid Saeed, Abu Dhabi TV, at one of the polling stations, Abu Dis, occupied Jerusalem.
In Taran village, a funeral procession was held for the Israeli soldiers, Adham Shahada and Saeed Jojan from Ara village. The body of Hussein Abu Leil from Ain Mahel village is still in the morgue. Munir Faris provided us with the following report. The body of the Israeli soldier, Saeed Joja, was buried in the funeral procession that was attended by hundreds of people, including his friends from the army and senior army officers. His twin brother, Walid, is still serving in the Israeli Defense Army in Rafah city. He was lucky because he was not at the location of the incident at the time of the explosion.
I think that you raised your son and children very well. He taught us a message during his life, and even after his death. I hope that all of us spend our best efforts to continue this path. I ask the government of Israel and the Prime Minister to make peace as soon as possible. No one benefits from this killing, which claimed the lives of tens of thousands of people. In the end, the only solution is peace.
Residents of the Tar'an village said goodbye to the Israeli soldier Adham Shahada, who was 20 years old. He was killed in a tunnel explosion below the military checkpoint near Rafah city. Hundreds of residents from the city and nearby villages went to give their condolences in the funeral procession tent, which was erected near the family's home. Adham is the oldest son in the Shahada family. He joined the Israeli army 1 year and 2 months ago. He loved military service, despite the dangerous security situation in the Philadelphia crossing where he served.
Only God has the power to help us. We knew that he was serving in this location, and we knew that it was dangerous. But God willing, this will be the last drop of blood we have to pay. God willing, Adham is going to be the last one. After Adham, we hope that we have peace. Let them share his blood. Let Sharon and the Palestinians make peace and get closer to each other, God willing.
Deep sadness overshadowed Ain Maher village in general and the Abu Lail family in particular, which lost its son Hussein Talal Abu Lail. Only 1 week ago, his family celebrated his 23rd birthday. May God have mercy on Hussein, whose friends say he was a polite young man. Maher played soccer and was planning to become a police officer after finishing service in the army, but his dream was taken away in the Rafah terrorist operation.
On the Palestinian issue, in the occupied lands, 4 Palestinians were martyred and 8 others were wounded during an invasion by occupation forces in the Khan Yunis refugee camp in the Gaza Strip. The incursion has left more than 90 Palestinian families homeless.
As usual, the occupation forces disrespect Christmas and the New Year, escalating its aggression against the Palestinian people only days before the holidays. Israeli forces invaded the Khan Yunis refugee camp in the Gaza Strip with the support of military bulldozers. They randomly fired their weapons into the air, martyring 4 Palestinians and severely wounding 8 others. More than 90 Palestinians were left homeless, taking refuge in schools belonging to the United Nations Refugee and Worker Agency for Palestinian Refugees. The occupation forces also used tanks to invade one of the hospitals in Khan Yunis, shooting machine gun fire towards the emergency care center, shocking and scaring the patients and doctors. This is the west and east images of another hospital in Khan Yunis. What the occupation forces did in Khan Yunis was not enough, but it also announced that it is committed to continue its aggression for 2 more consecutive days, demolishing dozens of homes. The continued Israeli aggression against the Palestinian people was not only exclusive to Khan Yunis, but also extended to Bethlehem, the home of Jesus Christ, peace be upon him, transforming the children's happiness over Christmas into sadness and pain after dozens of people were arrested, charged with resisting the occupation forces. Mahmoud Abbas, the executive president of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, condemned the Israeli occupation forces' invasion in Khan Yunis refugee camp. In response to continued Israeli terrorism against the Palestinian people, the resistance men were able to kill an Israeli security guard who works for a company that is constructing the apartheid separation separation wall near Hebron in the occupied West Bank. Meanwhile, resistance fighters also launched mortar shells on a number of Israeli settlements. Concerning the practices of the occupation forces, the World Bank president, James Wolfson, demanded that Israel must stop its constraints that are being imposed on the movement of Palestinian people and services since the start of the Intifada. He considered these constraints as the main reason behind the Palestinian economic crisis. Wolfson confirmed that the Israeli policy of closures over Palestinian Authority-controlled areas have hampered economic progress over the years, thus raising the poverty level of the Palestinians.
Documents revealed on the internet accused the U.S. President George W. Bush and exposed his involvement in the prisoner abuse scandal in Iraqi prisons and the Guantanamo prison in Cuba. The documents were the main reference used to allow prisoner abuse.
This time, President George Bush's denial is not enough. A letter from a federal investigation office last March, attributed to President Bush, was published on the internet, revealing his involvement in the notorious prison torture scandal in the Iraqi and the Cuban Guantanamo prisons. Strangulations, beatings, and putting lit cigarettes into detainees' ear openings. All of these methods were revealed in the documents. It turned out that President Bush made this document the main reference for the U.S. Army to increase their education about the methods used to torture prisoners. However, the documents of the U.S. Army offer a different story of torture. Their pictures reveal Iraqi prisoners and American generals in Iraq. They prohibited showing a picture of the body of one of the prisoners who died while under arrest in Mosul as a result of wounds and beatings to his head.
Some of the documents reveal pain and suffering and are considered a big problem. They show some of the military torture techniques by the Defense Department.
This time, the American leadership has major concerns. The accused is not a crazy soldier. Rather, the one being accused is the president himself. So what justifications are they going to use now?
Well, first of all, I think what you're referring to is some of the reports about some memos that have been publicly released now. The president expects that any allegations of abuse are taken seriously and fully investigated.
Amidst the denials and doubts about the authenticity of these documents, the question remains, what will be the judgment handed down by the American courts this time?
Medical sources in Al-Mumadiyah in southern Baghdad revealed that 5 people were killed and 20 others were injured when an oil cargo exploded. And in Latifiyah, north of Baghdad, 9 people were killed and 13 others were injured when a booby-trapped car hit a checkpoint operated by Iraqi forces located near the northeastern entrance of the city. Also, 4 civilians were killed in 2 separate attacks in Al-Samar, northern Baghdad. Iraqi cities are still living in an atmosphere of tension as violent operations against the American forces and the Iraqi forces that cooperate with them continue to rise. Only hours after the explosion that targeted the American military base in Al-Mosul, another huge explosion took place in Al-Najjar neighborhood. Then a booby-trapped car exploded in Al-Mumadiyah neighborhood in the middle of the Iraqi capital, Baghdad. As columns of smoke were coming out of the explosion site, eyewitnesses confirmed that the explosion caused many deaths and injuries, but without giving any specific numbers. The Iraqi National Guard said that 9 people were killed and 13 others were injured when another booby-trapped car exploded near an American and Iraqi joint checkpoint located near the entrance of Latifiyah city, north of Baghdad. Also, 4 civilians were injured in 2 separate incidents in Samarra city, north of Baghdad. The American forces surrounded whole neighborhoods in Al-Mosul and raided dozens of homes looking for the perpetrators of the attack, in which an American military base was targeted, killing more than 20 people, including 18 Americans. Meanwhile, Richard Myers, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said that the Al-Mosul attack was carried out by what he described as suicidal elements. Myers' comments support what one resistance group has already said. The group, which called itself the Ansar al-Sunnah Brigades, claimed responsibility for the attack on a website. claiming that one of its elements carried out the suicide operation with a truck loaded with explosives, killing 160 Americans. Meanwhile, an American military plane carrying the Americans who were injured in the al-Mosul attack arrived in Germany.
Emerging Palestinian leadership continued its diplomatic talks and preparations ahead of the January 9th presidential vote. Almost certain to win the elections is Fatah candidate and Palestinian Liberation Organization leader Mahmoud Abbas. Acting President Rouhi Fattouh met European Union Middle East envoy Mark Oti as diplomats swarmed into the region to discuss the upcoming elections. In a separate meeting, Palestinian Prime Minister Ahmed Qiyah convened his weekly cabinet meeting and criticized an upcoming conference on Palestinian reforms planned by British Prime Minister Tony Blair, who visited the West Bank yesterday. Qiyah rejected Blair's suggestion that Palestinians needed reform before there could be progress on the peace process. He said a peace conference was really needed, but he would not be in a position to decide whether Palestinians attend. Speaking on Israeli television after his day-long visit to Israel and the Palestinian territories to help revive peace efforts, Blair urged Palestinians to commit to ending violence.
What I can do, I hope, is get the international community in the same place in support of making sure that any eventual Palestinian state is democratic, has proper economic transparency, and has security structures in place that make it a proper partner for Israel.
In the latest bloodshed, 2 Palestinians were killed and 5 others were wounded in an explosion in a house in the Gaza refugee camp of Khan Yunis. Palestinians said an Israeli tank shell hit the house, but an Israeli army spokeswoman said there was no Israeli fire, and soldiers in a nearby Jewish settlement saw a huge explosion blow the roof off the house. Israeli forces earlier pulled out of the refugee camp, ending a 2-day raid, which the army said was aimed at halting mortar attacks by Palestinians operating in Khan Yunis. Armored vehicles rumbled out of the camp, leaving a trail of destruction. Dozens of Palestinian families fled their homes before armored bulldozers arrived. In Fallujah, U.S. Marines backed by aircrafts continued to fight insurgents as residents of the city began to return home. A group of 2,000 Fallujah residents were the first to go back after being displaced by a U.S.-led offensive against insurgents. The interim Iraqi government said those returning are heads of families who will decide whether it is safe for women and children to return. The return of civilians has been delayed while the city is cleared of unexploded ordnance left over from the attacks. Sporadic fighting also means it is still too dangerous to send contractors into some parts of the city to begin rebuilding. Fallujah has been without power or water since the attack, which destroyed hundreds of buildings and left power and communication lines severed and lying in the streets. The government has promised to compensate homeowners for damage to their properties from the attack. American military officials said the returnees would be issued new identity cards that feature photographs, fingerprints, and eye scans. And Jordan and Israel have signed a trade agreement aimed at enhancing national exports to European nations under European origin rules. The deal signed by Minister of Industry Trade Ahmed Hindawi and his Israeli counterpart Ehud Olmert lays the foundation for trade exchange between the two countries. Hindawi said the agreement was in line with His Majesty the King's vision to promote economic growth, whose dividends would be felt by the average Jordanian. He said the deal would shore up the investment climate in the kingdom through opening the European market to Jordanian exports. The minister noted that the kingdom had signed free trade agreements with the United States, Europe, and regional states.
is expected to hold its weekly meeting this afternoon. A day earlier, House Speaker Nabih Berri said the new electoral law should be based on the proportional system. He told MPs during their weekly gathering the majority voting system left a significant number of voters unrepresented. Former Prime Minister Rafik Hariri said the new electoral law would reinforce national unity. After talks in Turkey with Maronite Patriarch Cardinal Nasrallah Boutros Fir yesterday, the former Prime Minister said he backed the 1989 Taif Accord, which stipulates the Muhafaz as the only electoral regions. But Hariri stressed that the new law named the Kazas that would also contribute to the reinforcement of national unity. Responding to questions about an earlier meeting he held with An-Nahar newspaper editor-in-chief, Gibran Touene, Hariri said he was ready to cooperate with those who have Lebanon's interest at hand. He said despite differences with the Progressive Socialist Party leader, Walid Jumblat was still a friend. Hariri stressed there has not been enough cooperation between the government and the opposition. Jordan and Egypt chastised Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon for ruling out a return of Palestinian refugees and stressed that such a principle was enshrined in UN resolutions. After meeting his Jordanian counterpart, Hani Malouk, Egyptian Foreign Minister Ahmad Abu Ghait told reporters the right of return is the main Arab and Palestinian demand and was recognized by the international community. Sharon said in a keynote address at an annual conference on security in the Israeli coastal town of Herzliya last week that Israel would never allow refugees to return to their homes. According to the latest figures by the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, there are now 4.2 million refugees living in the West Bank, Gaza, Jordan, Lebanon and Syria. In remarks made in April, US President George W. Bush effectively ruled out the right of refugees to return, saying they must settle in an eventual Palestinian state. Israeli Defense Minister Shaul Mofaz asked to calm things down concerning the possibility of his country striking Iranian nuclear installations. In a televised interview, Mofaz said the way the United States was campaigning against Iranian leaders' desire to produce weapons of mass destruction was the right way. On Channel 10, he was responding to declarations made by Iranian Army Chief General Mohammad Salimi that his country's armed forces had been ordered to prepare to defend its nuclear sites against an attack. The Iraqi ambassador to Syria, Hassan Alawi, told Britain's Time newspaper his country had photographs that showed Syrian officials with guerrillas who were captured when US and Iraqi forces stormed Fallujah last month. According to the ambassador, Prime Minister Ayad Alawi wrote a letter to the Syrians saying he had pictures but was not going to release them, despite being under pressure from the Americans to do so. In Iraq, a roadside bomb killed a US soldier and wounded 2 others in Baghdad. No further information was provided. Dozens of people gathered outside the Iraqi city of Fallujah, eager to return to their homes and nervous about what they would find in the ghost town of rubble after 6 weeks of fighting between the US military and insurgents. The Iraqi government announced Monday that returning families would receive immediate assistance of $100 and be eligible for compensation of up to $10,000 for property damage. Elsewhere, violence continued. 3 Iraqi civilians and a policeman were killed in separate attacks on a mosque and a police station in Baghdad. Police said the Ashar Mohammediyya mosque in western Baghdad was hit by a mortar shell that killed 3 civilians and wounded 3 others. Another mortar shell exploded outside a police station in Baghdad's Al-Mamun district, killing 1 policeman and wounding another, police said, adding that it was the 3rd attack against the station in recent days. In Ba'quba, northeast of Baghdad, a policeman was killed overnight in the 3rd assassination by insurgents in the troubled city in the last 3 days. In Tikrit, a tribal chief, Hazem Dara, was gunned down by assailants. Karbala police said that they arrested 5 Iraqis and 1 foreigner linked to the Al-Qaeda network who confessed their involvement in Sunday's deadly bombing in the holy city. 14 people were killed and dozens wounded when a car bomb exploded in a bus station in Karbala in the 2nd deadly attack there in less than a week. Police said the arrest signaled that Saudi-born terrorist mastermind Osama bin Laden's Al-Qaeda group has an active cell in Karbala. Earlier, the U.S. Marines said they detained 44 suspects in a series of raids south of Baghdad, the latest in a month-long sweep that has netted around 600 militants. And a fuel truck driving along the main highway running north of Mahmoudiyya was attacked yesterday by gunmen who set the truck ablaze and kidnapped the Iraqi driver. Meanwhile, a suicide bomber rammed a car into an Iraqi forces checkpoint outside Latfiye, just to the south of Mahmoudiyya, killing 9 people and wounding 13. The interim Iraqi government and Washington have insisted ongoing violence would not deter upcoming January 30th elections. Interim Prime Minister Ayad Allawi promised transparent and competitive elections next month in Iraq and predicted ballots would prove far more powerful than bullets. In the Wall Street Journal, Allawi said Iraqis would be presented with a unique opportunity to close a chapter of decades of tyrannical rule and take their first steps to shape their own future. Two Saudi newspapers called Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi rash and mad Thursday, a day after Riyadh recalled its ambassador to Tripoli over what it said was a Libyan plot to kill the kingdom's de facto ruler. The Saudi move was the latest sign of a near collapse in ties between Saudi Arabia and Libya. Tripoli said it was surprised at the Saudi decision and denied involvement in any plot against Prince Abdullah. Libya expressed astonishment at the Saudi decision and asked the Arab League to investigate the matter. U.S. State Department said that Tripoli had not yet laid the arrest. U.S. concerns about the plot, which was an obstacle to dropping Libya from the U.S. list of state sponsors of terrorism and ending related sanctions. Last year, Prince Abdullah and Gaddafi clashed at an Arab summit when the Libyan leader criticized the kingdom for hosting U.S. forces before the Iraq war. The prince walked out after angrily pointing at Gaddafi and asking how he had come to power.
Friday, December 24th marks the birth anniversary of Imam Reza, the 8th Shiite Imam, whose shrine the Islamic Iran has the privilege to host in the holy city of Mashhad. On behalf of JNN English News Desk, I would like to congratulate Muslims on this auspicious occasion. Leader of the Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, says Qom Seminary School is an invaluable asset for the nation, which can help upgrade the status of Islam on the international stage. The leader told the High Council of the Seminary School Thursday the Liberal Democrats of the West have launched a massive onslaught against Muslims and the Islamic establishment. Ayatollah Khamenei went on to say those who come up with so-called new ideas for humans on all fronts have targeted the Islamic Republic of Iran from ideological, political, social, and ethical aspects, thanks to Iran's lofty status throughout the world. And added clerics, along with the religious seminary schools, are instrumental in efforts to thwart the plots hatched by the enemy. Iran and the Azerbaijan Republic stressed the need for deepening their security and defense ties. At the close of Baku talks on Thursday, Defense Minister Admiral Ali Shamkhani and his Azeri counterpart, Safar Abiyaf, said closer ties will pave the way for the establishment of peace and security in the region. As for security assurances on Caucasus and the Persian Gulf littoral states, Shamkhani said foreign forces have launched a psychological ballyhoo against the region to justify their presence, which has created more tension in the region. Foreign Minister Kamal Karazi says developments in the region required Iran and Syria to keep on constant consultations while reaching common views in line with mutual interests. Karazi, who was visiting Damascus Thursday, told the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad that some big powers, among them the Zionist Israel, are after fueling the tribal and religious differences among the regional countries. President Assad, on his part, highlighted the importance of Tehran-Damascus ties and said the accusations put forth against Syria and Iran are sheer lies. Iranian Prosecutor General Duri Najafabadi says recent judicial reforms have improved human rights situation in Iran, which is far better compared to that in some countries. The official also said the resolution approved by the UN General Assembly against Iran is politically motivated, adding pro-human rights countries must first evaluate their performance in Iraq, Afghanistan, and the occupied Palestine. Najafabadi concluded by saying some of the issues raised against Iran in the UN resolution are far from reality.
The views expressed on Mosaic are not those of Link TV or its sponsors, but of the broadcasters themselves. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin.